The Senate will now have before for final consideration Senate Bill 1375. The Secretary of the Senate will read the bill.
In the Senate, Senate Bill 1375 by Finance Committee, an act relating to the appropriation to Health and Human Services, appropriating monies to the Department
Mr. President.
Senator Cook.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that further reading of Senate Bill 1375 be dispensed with, and the journal show that it has been read the third time at length, section by section, and placed before the Senate for further consideration.
Is there an objection? Hearing none, Senator Cook, you have the floor to open debate.
Thank you, President. Senators, this is the fiscal year 2027 maintenance appropriation bill for the Health and Human Services. Health and Human Services is a way we've grouped some maintenance budgets around. Maintenance budgets are basically what money do we need to keep the tires on the bus and keep it rolling, keep the lights on, and so forth. This is the granddaddy of all of your appropriation bills that you will hear this year. This is for $5.7 billion. That's with a B. And I don't tell you that to try and scare you or anything, but I tell you that you might listen up on this one. I'm going to try and walk you through it. If you want to hear about it, great. If you don't, hit the snooze button here. I'm going to start out on page 2 of the actual bill and try to walk through it. There are 2 government entities or agencies that are involved with this budget. There's the Department of Health and Welfare and the State Independent Living Council, or SLIC as we call it. Also, there are 12 different budgets in this. So we, as the JFAC, we looked at each individual budget and went through it. But on this bill that's being presented to you as a maintenance bill, all 12 budgets are wrapped together into one. In a Senate Bill 1331 that this body voted on, I think last week, and we passed it, that was the 5% recession of holdback that we did. That included the 3% from the governor and the 2% that the JFAC imposed upon him. You won't see that in this bill. It is baked into it. So you're not going to see that. And in fact, as we walk through this bill, you're not going to see much of where that money's being spent. You're not going to see that in a budget, in a maintenance bill. If you want to see that, you got to go somewhere else. But starting on page 2, going across the top, there's 4 columns. There's a personal costs, operating expenditures, trustee and benefit payments, and the total. The personal cost is basically meaning the salary and benefits that are paid out. The operating expenditures is for your contractors, professional services, travel, utilities, and supplies. And then your trustee and benefit, those are claims or pass-through, where money is just passed through onto somebody else, like your public health agency. So starting on line 6 is our first budget, or we're going to call it a division. It is the Youth Safety Permanency. Underneath this, there are 2 budgeted programs, Youth Safety Permanency, and on line 16, again we're on page 2, on line 16 it's the Foster and Assistant Payments. Line 25 is our totals. So total within this division, there's 500.53 full-time positions. For a total amount, if you go on line 25 clear to the right, it's $121,545,100. On line 26 is our next budget. It's early learning and development. There are 3 budgeted programs underneath that. Line 27, the early learning and development. And then on page 3, line 5 is your Idaho Child Care Program. Line 12 is Southwest Idaho Treatment Center, which we often refer to as SWITC. Down on line 21 is the division total. And though you don't see this, I'm just going to tell you there's 259.33 full-time positions for this division, with a grand total of $101,862,800. The next budget that we have is on line 22, Family and Community Partnerships. and there's only one budgeted program, and that's itself. For 38.55 FTPs for a grand total of $7,259,000. Line 31 is the next budget. It's Division of Welfare, and it has two budgeted programs. Line 32 has got the self-reliance operations, and then on page 4 is line 10 is the benefit payment. Within this division, there are 609.5 full-time employees, positions, for a grand total of $132,341,700. Again, if you look at these, you're not seeing what's being spent, but you're seeing general funds. You're just seeing the funds. If we're on page 4 and you look at line 12, Cooperative Welfare General Fund, line 14, Cooperative Welfare Dedicated Fund, 16, Cooperative Welfare Federal Fund. So it's breaking it down by dedicated, general, and federal funds. And that's what you're going to see underneath each budget. Every once in a while, you'll see a new fund come in that will do it. In fact, this next one. So on line 21 is the Medicaid Administration and Medical Management. Underneath that, on line 25, you'll see Medicaid Management Information Systems Dedicated Fund. That's what they call MMIS. And 3 years ago, we voted to take a bunch of money, put it in this dedicated fund, and then we use that money every year to, as they meet their milestones on this software project. Line 29, you'll also see another fund there. That's the Idaho Millennium Income Fund that they're paying into this account. Again, it doesn't tell you what it's being used for, but it does tell you that what the funds are being used. Okay, on page 5, line 5 is the second budgeted program here. It's the Coordinated Medicaid Fund. 16, Enhanced Medicaid Fund. Line 27, Basic Medicaid Fund. And then when you go to page 6, you got two more budgeted programs, Expansion Medicaid Plan, the Extended Employment Service, and then line 20 is your division total. For a 303.5 FTPs, grand total finance is money, $5,049,100, I'm sorry, that's $5,049,174,800 for that division. Line 21, you jump down into the Public Health Services. There are 4 budgeted programs there. Again, if you look at the funds, there's some different funds that are being used there and telling you where the money is coming out of. But on page 7, you get the division total of 214 FTPs for a grand total of $105,650,400. Page 8, you get the indirect support services, another budget. There you have 244.75 FTPs on line 13 for a grand total of $47,761,900. The next budgeted item there is, we're on the 8th budgeted item, line 14, that's the licensing and certification. They have 68 people in this division, and it's for $8,816,500. The 9th substance is the substance abuse treatment. Again, if you look at those funds, we're pulling funds out of the Liquor Control Fund. We're pulling funds out of Idaho Millennium Income Fund as well. And for a grand total there, they have 12 FTPs, $26,561,400. Page 9, mental health services. They have 2 budgeted programs, the Children's Mental Health and Adult Mental Health. And FTPs for that division are 185.8. and a grand total of $43,153,500. 9th, the psychiatric hospital. You've got 4 budgeted programs. This one involves the State Hospital North, State Hospital South, State Hospital West for 491 FTPs and a grand total of $68,295,600. And finally, our 12th budget, and this is a different entity, so this is not, it's kind of under the Department of Health and Welfare, but it's an entity of its own, the independent councils. And let's see, I'm sorry, I screwed up there. That's not true. This is the independent councils. There's 2 budgeted programs, and this is underneath the Department of Health and Welfare. You've got the Development Disabilities Council and the Domestic Violence Council. There's 11 people for a grand total of $15,021,900. Now you have the State Independent Living Council. And so this is another government entity. It has 4 FTPs and $690,600. So for a grand total on this budget that we've just went through, there are 2,942.77 FTPs, full-time positions, for a grand total of, and again this is on page 11, line 24, the grand total of $5,728,135,200. Again, this is a maintenance budget. This has been looked at by JFAC individually budgets. We put it all together though, so it's a little harder to tell what's going on. If you need to go down farther, if your constituents start asking you questions, you'll have to dig down a little bit deeper because it was not going to tell you in this. It just shows you the funds. So with that, Mr. President, debate is open.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President.
Senator Zeiderfeld.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, I just would like to stand here and give a reason why I will be voting against this maintenance bill. And I'm going to keep it short, but I'm going to share what I'm really concerned about with this is when you look at our forecast that we forecasted for 2027, it's $5.8 billion. Just the general fund alone on this maintenance is $1.182 billion, which is a huge chunk of our general fund. We are highly dependent on the federal. If you look at the total of $5.6 billion total, we're highly dependent on the federal for this. And we're also seeing that we're seeing changes of percentages where the federal is starting to decrease the amount that they're paying on a lot of the different programs, and the state has to increase their percentage. And it concerns me because with our again, with our revenue only coming in at 5.8 estimated for next year, this is eating up a large chunk of this, and we need to start really making some really hard decisions on how we're going to maintain a lot of this. But I just wanted to share why I'm voting and what my true concern is, because I don't think this is sustainable for our state at the rate we're going here with the health and welfare.
Thank you, Senator. Is there further debate?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator
To
Wintrow.
advance the bill.
You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excuse me, let me hang up my phone so no one calls me. I appreciate the Senator's description of the budget in front of us. It is a lot. And I guess I'm just going to fill in some of the blanks about what the 2% ongoing, well, excuse me, in this budget it's a little different. It's a 4% ongoing rate reduction for providers and then a 5% ongoing cut for most of the rest of the Department of Health and Welfare. So I'll delineate that. But the thing that you've probably heard the most about is the Medicaid rates. So in the current year, we cut Medicaid by 4%, all the provider rates, and the decision is being made in this maintenance bill to continue that 4% rate increase going on into the future. The problem with that is that 4% rate reduction is harming providers to be able to give services because the rates are coming down even farther. So assisted livings, for example, which already have a pretty constrained budget the way it's done, and I won't bore you with all those details, but they're having, with that rate, they're already having problems taking Medicaid patients, and now as that rate comes down, they're going to have even more difficulty, and they're actually turning patients away. That means they go to skilled nursing, which is a much higher cost of care, or there are some folks that are finding themselves without a place to live, which is a problem. Physicians all over the state have been emailing us. I mean, I've got letters 5 inches high here, probably 500 letters about the impacts of these rate reductions on services, but physicians are saying, well, I'm not going to be able to afford to keep as many of these patients, so I might have to start turning more Medicaid patients away, which means if they're sick, they're driving them to the emergency room, which is a much higher cost of care. So this budget is really about shifting costs down the road. You might save a penny today, but we're going to pay $1 later for every penny we save, which is a problem. We know in that 4% rate reduction, Magellan, who's the MCO, actually had to cut their rates. And they cut up to 15%, which eliminated the ACT teams, which we've heard so much about. We've now associated 4 deaths of clients from some of those teams since December. The program was canceled December 1, and I got word today that 4 people now are associated with deaths of those teams being cut. We know the peer support program was cut because of this, and that is the group that helps the courts with their treatment, the treatment courts. These are peers that help folks who are in, drug courts and mental health to keep them stable, to get the services they need and make sure they can be held accountable and actually change their lives. I don't know if you've been to some of those treatment court graduations, but not a dry eye in the house. Those are being threatened. The courts this year have said we can pick it up till July, but after that, things are uncertain. And we know, again, that helps with recidivism. So if we don't have this on the front end, we're creating costs down the road again. These 4% rate reductions are a problem, and not only because, as I look through my packet, the amount of money we're losing in general funds alone in Medicaid is $28,735,800, but we're foregoing $159 million, almost $160 million of federal funds that would actually go into the care of these folks. So it's not only harming the services that are being provided and risking the safety and lives of individuals, it's also having an economic negative impact as well. These are problematic cuts, and they're not going away. The biggest problem with the rate provider cut is we had a report on the direct care workforce some years ago, and we actually infused money into, we did a hospital assessment, we actually infused money into that program to raise rates to make sure we could hire appropriate and qualified folks. So when we reduce rates, it risks getting people who are appropriate and qualified, not as many people employed, and then people don't get the services they need. Big problem. I'm just going to highlight a couple of the others because there's just too many for our time today. But in youth safety and permanency, there's a $431,000, almost $432,000 cut. That impacts post-adoption services. These are kids who are being adopted and maybe really struggling and in trauma, and these are the crew of people that really help those families on an ongoing basis, really trying to help them and keep those kids in their family so they don't get turned back. Self-reliance, a $2 million hit there, and this is the place where eligibility is determined. This body passed House Bill 345 last year to increase the amount of times that people have to be assessed for eligibility, and therefore that's going to cost money. I don't know if you've ever sat in a self-reliance accessibility meeting, but it's pretty thorough. It's not very easy to get Medicaid, as some people think it is, but it's really not. So that takes staffing and resources to do that. So we're eliminating that. We're going backward there. So again, the accountability for eligibility is on the line there. I'm going to flip through a couple more pages. Public health. We're cutting $1 million there in home visiting. A home visiting program is one of the best prevention tools to keep kids out of foster care. These are folks that go in people's homes of new parents, parents at risk, and teach them parenting skills and give them the strength and coaching to do a better job in parenting. And we've heard success story after success story. So I've heard now with that $1 million cut, we're going to eliminate 200 families statewide will have to be disenrolled because we just don't have the ability to pay the nurse or the parent as teacher to go help these folks. The list goes on. Mental health services, 1.9 million. That's in children and adult mental health. We already know we have a crisis there. And I have too many more pages to go on. But again, I would encourage us really to think about, the senator brought up revenue, that there might be a better way to deal with this than cuts and use some of our reserve funds so we don't do any more harm to these folks or the economy or the programs, instead of doing these deep cuts that are ongoing. Mr. President, also for a 39H, declaration of a conflict, I have a leadership development firm, and I did some training for the Council for Developmental Disabilities.
Your declaration under the Senate rule will be noted in the Journal. Is there further debate?
Mr. President.
Senator Guthrie.
Thank you, Mr. President, Senators. You know, I've been opposed to a few of the budgets that's come through, but I wanted to go into a little more detail, and I think this is an appropriate budget to do that on. A little bit of history. I've been here for 16 years, and every so often we experience a defining moment as we serve in the legislature. Moments that signal the path we choose for the state as we pass legislation and that define us as legislators. Those defining moments don't happen every year, and what you recognize as a defining moment may be different for you than it is for me. But I'd like to talk about two of those defining moments that for me have something in common, and both deal with budgets, which, by the way, is the only thing we're constitutionally, I think, mandated to do. And they end up being bookends to my legislative career. My freshman year was 2011, and we were on the tail end of the Great Recession. And other than Mr. President and myself, we were the only ones that were serving in the legislature at that time, if my memory is correct. During the sessions of 2009, 10, and 11, $600 million was cut from the general fund. In addition, $450 million of rainy day funds were used, basically emptying those accounts without any impact on the bond rating at the time. Today, we're seeing massive cuts to budgets across the board. Once again, we're in a financial quandary. Certainly, we're seeing that in Senate Bill 1375 with huge cuts, and in other budgets as well. The similarities of those two examples end there, and there's key difference in those budget cycles. In 2011, the entire nation was in recession, and everyone understood there would be sacrifices. As those painful cuts become reality, we became a team, and we pulled together to survive the downturn. Back then, it was really no one's fault. It was just the cyclical nature of economic cycles coupled with other factors such as banks overextending, home loans, and financial institutions that went bankrupt by their own mismanagement or because they became collateral damage that led to the financially unfortunate perfect storm. So when we talk about pulling ourselves up by the bootstraps and tightening our belts, the Great Recession was a testament to that resilient Idaho spirit. But today's challenge is not that. Couldn't be further from that. Today's financial pain, in my opinion, is in large part self-inflicted. We have put ourselves in an uncomfortable financial corner. The short of it is something my dad told me, and it may sound familiar because Mr. President has recounted the same advice his dad gave him. The advice is, it's not the bad years that will hurt you, it's the good years. In bad years, you toughen up, you make the hard decisions to survive, much like we did during the Great Recession. During the good years, it can be tempting to overspend, like there's going to be no end to it, and you set yourself up for problems. So in a strong economy last year, we spent and we gave over $450 million of tax relief, along with other spending decisions, all before setting a revenue number, which was never realistic because by May we were in trouble, and by July the 3% and 4% holdbacks for Medicaid were put in place. And I will note that, for the record, I voted against over $300 million worth of tax cuts last year. We also knew early on that the big beautiful bill was going to cause a financial hit, And there were opportunities that either the gentleman on the second floor or the legislature could have called ourselves back into session to put a hold on the income tax cuts until things got in a little better place financially. But instead, we waited for the economy to bail us out, and now that that hasn't happened, we're making cuts that will have impacts to real citizens. Again, you know, we talk about tightening our belts, but that is not the case. We're not tightening our belts at all. We're not taking a pay cut. We're not compromising our benefits. We are tightening the belts of Idaho citizens, and the feedback from my constituents is that they are not happy about it. We could also opt to use some of the $1.7 billion in reserve accounts, keeping in mind that's taxpayer money we have already taken from their pockets. But for some reason, even though we're over the limits on those reserve accounts, we refuse to even considering a modest amount to help mitigate and take some of the sting off this situation. The calls I get about the Medicaid cuts have been nonstop since summertime. The fallout from these cuts will have a negative ripple effect for years, as the cost shift will shift that cost to a higher treatment, ERs, mental health services, law enforcement, eventually insurance rates going up for all of us. It also hurts not just the people that need the service, but those that are working on bare bones margins to try to provide them. I could go on, but Senators, I know what the vote count will be. I wish it would be different. We are potentially doing real harm this year as we find ourselves in this defining moment. We can do better, although it appears we're not going to. You know, this issue gets painted as a conservative, liberal issue. It's really a human issue. But as for me, I'm comfortable with how my no vote will define me. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further debate? Hearing none. Senator Cook, you're recognized to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank those Legislative District 24, 18, and 28 for your very thoughtful remarks. I thought they were pertinent to this bill and to the legislation that sits before you. Maybe just in closing, just add one thing at the risk of the good president gaveling me, talking about we are working on funding and policy for the ACT and peer support. I'll stop there.
Good choice.
Thank you. In closing, if you were to look at the SOP for this bill, you'll find that the change, the percent change and the money that was held back, for instance, the FTP, we dropped 90.87 full-time positions from this budget. We, in the general fund, we dropped $47,374,100 from this fund, from this budget. Dedicated fund, we dropped $31,713,700. The federal fund, we dropped $207,629,600 from the federal fund. So for a grand total of what we dropped there was $286,717,400. Now, for some of you that might be good news, others it might be bad news. But we certainly tightened our belt and figured out where we could cut some stuff to try and get our budget balanced, the bottom line. In the end, this bill has a reduction of 4.8%. And with that, Mr. President, debate is closed.
Debate is closed. The question before you is, shall Senate Bill 1375 pass the Senate? The Senate Secretary will call the roll.
Adams. Anthony. Byrne.
60 seconds.
Senator Burns, you have 60 seconds to explain your vote.
Thank you. Senators, if there was a time when I wanted to stand up and give a standing ovation to a testimony that was given on this floor, it was just a moment ago by the good senator from 28. I hope you all paid attention because he was spot on. And this, the Senator votes no.
Senator Burnt votes no.
Bierke, Blaylock, Burtenshaw, Coho, Cook,
Aye.
Van Hartog, Foreman, Galloway, Grow, Guthrie, Harris, Hart, Kaiser, Cole, Lakey, Lent, Nichols, Okonowitz, Robbie, Ricks, Ruckte,
Mr. President, 60 seconds.
You have 60 seconds, Senator Rudke.
Mr. President, to echo similar words, that was a true speech of statesmanship, and I hope it's recognized as such, and I hope the audience recognizes what it just heard. Thank you.
Senator, you need to vote.
Nay.
Senator Rudke votes no.
Brunag, Samaroth, Shippey, Taylor, Taves, Van Orden, Ward Ingleking, Wintrow, Woodward, Cito.
You have 60 seconds, Senator.
And it's nice to see you smile when I stand up. Thank you. Mr. President, the fact is that our welfare state just continues to increase. Our federal funds that we're seeing come in to help us with all this or get us dependent on the federal money is going away. All of these shifts are coming to the state, and we have to make structural budget reforms that will be existing so that our children and our grandchildren will be able to live in a world where they are not so overburdened by the taxes that they have to pay that they can't live and take care of their families. Mr. President, I have to vote no until we see some structural change.
Senator Zito votes no.
Niederveld, Burtenshaw, Coho, Lakey, Robbie, Shippey, Taylor,
The vote count shows 10 in favor with 25 against. Senate Bill 1375 has failed to pass the Senate and will be retained in the office of the Senate Secretary.